It happened to the director of the CIA. It happened to the head of the International Monetary Fund. It happened to comedian Bill Maher. All of these people within the past few years and several others were offered honorary degrees or chances to speak at universities. And then protesters from the left demanded that those offers be rescinded and the speeches canceled. And in some cases, that actually did happen. And what was that? Was that censorship? Or was that the left also exercising its right of free expression? And are conservatives, when given the chance, going to do exactly the same thing? Well, that sounds like the makings of a debate. So let's have it. Yes or no to this statement. Liberals are stifling intellectual diversity on campus. A debate from Intelligence Squared US.
Let me start by whisking you back to a magical time, 2001. A conservative would dismiss me as a liberal cliche. I was a floppy-haired Burning Man regular San Franciscoite who turned down big law firm salaries to work for social justice. I had worked in refugee camps in Eastern Europe, for an environmental justice mentoring program in DC, and for the ACLU of Northern California. And most of all, I loved the First Amendment, the quintessential liberal cause, or so I thought. 2001 was also the year I started working at FIRE, which proudly defends speech and academic freedom for speakers of any political stripe. As soon as I started at FIRE, however, I was inundated with hundreds of pleas for help. It wasn't long before I learned this unfortunate truth. If you're going to be censored on the modern college campus for your opinion, chances are you're going to be censored by the left. And this is what we mean by the left, and most Americans mean when we say liberal these days. Either people on the left side of the political spectrum, or people who self-identify as liberals and people to their left. I've seen so many crazy examples of politically correct censorship. A student in Indiana punished just for publicly reading a book. A sorority sister forced to publicly repent for insensitivity for a Taco Tuesday event. And Yale students banned from calling Harvard students sissies on a t-shirt, which was a quote from S. Scott Fitzgerald, by the way. This is heartbreaking to me and my teammate, since both of us consider ourselves liberals. Of course, there are many, quote, good liberals out there who still support free speech both on and off campus. These include former ACLU President Nadine Strawson, the nation's Michelle Goldberg, renowned First Amendment attorney Floyd Abrams, and many more. But one thing all of these liberals have in common is that they also believe that campus liberals have become distressingly intolerant of dissent. Take any hot topic in America today, and I can point you to examples of students and faculty members getting in trouble for being on the conservative side of the issue. Take abortion. While FIRE has proudly supported the free speech rights of pro-choice students, we are far more likely to have to come to the defense of pro-life students. How bad is it? At Northern Kentucky University, a professor actually led her students to destroy a pro-life display. The display was only dozens of little white crosses to protest Roe v. Wade. At Dartmouth, a similar pro-life display, this time involving tiny American flags, was considered so offensive that another student ran it over with his car. That reckless censor, if you have any guess about what his politics were, he had a coexist sticker on the back of his car. Or take immigration. At UCLA, a student group faced ferocious protests and a massive fine when they simply attempted to invite someone to come to campus to debate against their pro-immigration stance. And though I'm an atheist, I have been horrified by repeated attempts to censor campus evangelicals. Kirsten will tell you more about those cases. Last year, campus liberals made national headlines for demanding that speakers they did not like be disinvited from campuses across the country. This problem has been growing for years. According to extensive research by FIRE, if you're going to face a disinvitation push arising from campus, it's about 3 times as likely it's going to come from your left. This is especially shocking when you consider how rare it is for a conservative to be invited in the first place. Last year's commencement season saw 25 Democratic political figures speak at the commencements of 60 of America's top universities. And how many Republicans were invited to speak? 0. And this statistic comes from Nate Silver's decidedly non-conservative 538 website. Some conservatives were invited to talk at universities outside the top 60, including Rutgers. However, even there, former Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice bowed out after months of pressure from faculty and students. Even mild satire from conservatives isn't tolerated. Take the case of Omar Mahmoud, a Muslim conservative at the University of Michigan. When this past December, he wrote a satirical column poking fun at microaggressions and privilege theory, very mild. He was not only fired from the student newspaper, but his dorm room door was vandalized. This prompted famous liberal writer Jonathan Chait to criticize the rise of a new wave of political correctness. If Angus and Jeremy concede that there is a problem with free speech on campus, they may blame the massive corporatized modern university. And on this we agree. Much of the censorship does come from out-of-control administrators. However, we must understand that liberals so thoroughly dominate the current academy, as Kirsten will show, that if they were serious about freedom of speech on campus, this kind of administrative overreach would not be possible. Despite liberal dominance on campus, or maybe because of it, 55% of over 400 colleges surveyed last year maintain wildly unconstitutional speech codes, while only 4% maintain codes that fully meet First Amendment standards. And this in spite of nearly 36 lawsuits against politically correct speech codes since 1989, successful lawsuits. And we can't forget that the tools that are most often used to silence dissent on campus are the brainchildren of professors including Catherine McKinnon, Mary Matsuda, and Richard Delgado, all of whom were liberal leaders of the speech code movement in the 1980s. Though it gives me no joy to say it, you must vote in favor of the motion, yes, liberals do stifle intellectual diversity on campus. Thank you.
Thank you, Greg Lukianoff.
I've seen genuinely heartbreaking cases of things that you should never do to people coming from administrators, and that are very much left. There was a University of Wisconsin case where they were telling a student he couldn't have a Bible study meeting in his own room on his own time because if people knew he was an evangelical Christian, they might find that offensive. Again, I'm an atheist, but that's wrong.
Greg Lukianoff.
There's something really important, though, I want to say, is that we're talking about how, Jeremy was talking about the consistency of liberals. And the kind of liberal that I grew up in was one that adamantly believed in freedom of speech. And Angus is good on freedom of speech. And we have a lot of cases on which we agree. But if the administration, which overwhelmingly leans left, if modern liberals were as good on free speech as the old 60s and 70s liberals were, as me and Angus are on these issues, these administrative overreach things, as I said in my statement, would be impossible. Sometimes it's active, sometimes it's just complicit, but it's allowing the stifling of intellectual diversity. Just a simple sort of basic philosophical point. John Stuart Mill, in his wonderful 1859 book on liberty, talks about civility. And this is why you should always be concerned about calls for civility, is he points out that civility ends up getting defined by the people who are in charge. And you'll notice that when people argue for civility, they tend to actually believe that whatever they say is civil, and if they're angry about it, it's righteous rage. But if you say it and it's kind of sharp or mean, then it's incivil. And this is one of the reasons why it is a problem that you have this incredible sort of liberal dominance on campus, is that you end up actually seeing in some cases what your point of view is as, and anybody opposing, as being fundamentally incivil. And sometimes disagreement, to be productive, can't be all that civil. But here's my problem with trigger warnings. I wrote a short book called Freedom from Speech, and I'm afraid that's kind of where we're headed. And I can go to philosophical reasons why I think trigger warnings are dangerous. But here's the practical reason. Because 7 humanities professors wrote Inside Higher Education saying, oh my God, if these are becoming expectations, they're not mandatory yet, but because they're becoming expectations, I'm receiving angry emails and angry letters from students and from administrators saying, I better provide these. But guess what? It's impossible to know what actually might trigger someone.
But why are they liberal? Why is it a liberal thing?
Because it's sensitivity-based. It's a sensitivity-based warning idea that is absolutely in line with all of the speech codes we've been talking about the entire time.
Well, there was also a New Yorker article that was written by a Harvard law professor about the fact that that she teaches rape law, and she has had students demand that there be trigger warnings.
Or that she not teach it.
And is ultimately sort of culminated with the idea, and she says specifically that this is perpetrated by left-wing groups who are advising the students to tell them that they shouldn't have to sit in a rape law class if it's upsetting to them, to the point that she said, surveying various professors across the country, that they're now giving up teaching rape law because of the fear of the backlash from the students.
Let me let Jeremy Mayer. And here to summarize his position in support of this motion, liberals are stifling intellectual diversity on campus, Greg Lukianoff, president of the Foundation for Individual Rights in Education.
Thank you. This evening, Kirsten and I have provided data and real examples demonstrating how liberals are stifling intellectual diversity on campus. But you don't have to take it from us. Just ask the professors themselves. In a 2012 study, a representative sample of about 300 social psychologists were asked if 2 job candidates with equal qualifications were to apply for an opening in your department and you knew one was politically conservative, would you be inclined to vote for the more liberal one? 82% of liberal social psychologists said they would at least be a little bit prejudiced against the conservative applicant. This is shocking, especially when you consider that social psychologists are so often concerned about the harm of unconscious bias. It can be very hard to get respondents to concede that they might be prejudiced. Not so apparently with conservatives and Christians. It's a well-known rule of social science that the more politically homogeneous a group is, the more radical in that direction it tends to become, and the more the group begins to act as a tribe that sees outsiders as enemies who are either stupid or simply bad or greedy. Unfortunately, we're seeing this play out within our colleges and universities. Too many liberals are stifling intellectual diversity on campus, and in doing so, they are encouraging people just to talk with those who they already agree. Their endless rules for correct speech are encouraging people to keep their opinions to themselves. This only makes the tribalism problem worse and the walls of the echo chamber thicker. It's not supposed to be this way, and it doesn't have to be this way. But the first step towards recovery is admitting you have a problem. And on our campuses, we have a problem. And I hope you all recognize tonight that liberals, sadly, are stifling intellectual diversity. Thank you.
Thank you, Greg Lukianoff.